Thank you so much for joining us, first of all. So a quick intro. I met Carly in high school. The only thing we had in common was X-Files. And 15 years later, she posted about X-Files on Facebook and I responded, we reconnected, we had a great time, and we actually both have production and marketing backgrounds. So we decided to create this fan retrospective. So in the last 2 years, we've been catching up with cast, crew, and speaking to fans worldwide, and it's been awesome. And we're so excited that you took the time to do this today. So we're just going to jump into our questions, and thanks again.
Yeah, let's do it.
So Nick, Krycek's character arc was just amazing. Like, your character is probably my favorite on the show. You were just such a badass throughout the whole series. How did you prepare for like a role that was always changing?
Well, that's an excellent question. You know, it was rare that we would ever know what was coming up until sort of you got the script and sort of broke it open and spent any time sort of, you know, looking at it, right? So I've always said this, I've said it many times in interviews and stuff. It was always like Christmas opening up a script, because you didn't know if you'd be running out of an exploding car or hanging from 17 floors by one arm or having oil ooze out of your orifices, or you know, it just was it. And I was really fortunate in that Krycek got to do so much crazy stuff, right? So it was always like this surprise. The only time really that I ever knew beforehand what was going to happen was when in Terma and Tunguska, when I knew I had to be speaking some Russian, and at that point they hooked me up with a Russian person, an actor, and we spent time, you know, trying to get me to sound like I could speak Russian.
Did a pretty good job of that. I mean, you sure sounded like you knew Russian.
Well, I was doing a Zoom thing with somebody who the other day who, I've forgotten where they're from now, but this lovely person, and she was saying that, you know, you know, she speaks Russian, and she said, you know, it was actually really believable. So I suppose I did my job. That was I mean, those 2 episodes I very fondly remember. You know, it's funny, I've been sort of like most people, I've been cleaning out my basement and my crawl space and my this and my that, and and I've got boxes and boxes of memorabilia, right? All kinds of really great things. I'm a bit of a pack rat, so if you stand around this room, you know what I'm talking about. But and so I was sitting crouched in our crawl space on a little chair, sitting there in the under a light bulb, looking at all these pieces and bits and lunch boxes and pen knives and jackets and shirts and on and on and on, all this, like, and it's sort of, you know, all these memories sort of flooding back about this or that, or where I'd been, or what happened when this happened, you know. So it's easy to forget those things, but it was nice to sort of do a bit of a retrospective myself.
Nice.
Find a favorite thing when you were going through? Because I know I have some, like, my memorabilia behind me from the different productions I've worked on, and I could tell you what my favorite one is. Yeah. Do you have a favorite one that you found?
I think here it is right here, actually, and it doesn't look like anything. It really doesn't look like anything. Can you guess what that is?
Is that a potato?
It looks like a potato, but it's definitely something that was your arm. That's your arm, right?
Yeah. When Kovarubius comes to get me in the gulag, and I'm showering, and I've got and my arm's cut off. This was the thing that they, you know, that they glued onto my arm to make it look like I had.
That's so cool.
That is very cool.
It does look a little like a potato, though, from the screen.
It does look like a yam, actually.
Yes. It's seasonal. It's great.
It's seasonal, yeah, for sure.
So at the height of the 90s, can you talk about how it was like to be part of the X-Files phenomenon?
Well, I mean, listen, you're lucky if you get on any show. You know, there's so much more material now. There's so many more platforms. There's so many more shows out there that there's a lot more actors around, and there's a lot more working actors around. It was less so back in the 90s, and you know, I on my wall there, you can't really see it very well, but that was the sign on my door when I was on SNL with David. You know, listen, it kind of, you know, it was remarkable, right? It really was. Mitch and I were in Spain or London. That's what it was. We were in London, and we barely escaped fans who were chasing down our car, and we had to go through a special exit and don't go this way, don't go that way. And they hustled us into a car, and it was like people, like hundreds of people running down the street and chasing our car and crying and trying to stick things in through the window. And you know, I've always looked at it like, you know, I'm just a very small piece of a puzzle, and you know, I believe I'm somewhere along the end of the line in terms of taking credit for the popularity of the character or the show or anything. So when you've got people screaming and chasing you, it's exciting as hell, but it's unnerving. You know, we weren't the Beatles, but it kind of just felt a little bit like we were. But you know, it's obviously a bit of a phenomenon, right? Again, given all the shows and all the platforms and all the stuff that's going on these days, there's more room for shows to kind of take off, and more eyeballs to be watching them with Netflix and all that kind of stuff. But it was just a kind of good fortune to be involved in something that became so big. We went to the Virgin Megastore in the Champs-Elysees, and there was thousands and thousands and thousands of people showed up. And I was in Northern Ireland, and I had a kid stuff me a note that I looked at, and it said, "Please give this to Mulder and Scully." And it said, you know, there's troubles in Ireland, and the police aren't doing anything, and the government's not helping us. Please come to Northern Ireland and help us, right? So you want to talk about like the power of television, right? It was pretty remarkable. I got choked up when I read it.
Yeah, for sure.
Wow, that's crazy.
Yeah, so it was big. It was really big, and in some ways we were lucky enough to. I was lucky enough to just be along for the ride.
Do you have a favorite behind the scenes memory?
I do, you know, again, this sort of goes to my first point, which was that I was fortunate. I mean, I was fortunate enough that they put this character into so many crazy scenarios that it's hard to sort of pick one, quite honestly. But they were all sort of action adventure related, you know, and I've always loved to do my own stunts. And it's funny, my wife is working on a show now by Mike Flanagan, the guy that did, you know, Haunting a Hill House and Bly Manor, and this is his third one. And she was talking about just sort of issues and challenges of being on the set last night and pyrotechnics and stuff like that. And I started telling the story of when Krycek runs out of the exploding car, and really what that was me sitting in a car that had been hollowed out, and it was just full of containers of gasoline or you know, pyrotechnic fluid. And you know, it was big safety meetings, and there was one guy at the end of the line who had a plunger, right? And that's what it was all about. And I got out of they call action, and I was supposed to run past a certain line on the sidewalk that would, and that's when I knew they were going to blow the car. Action, I get out, I'm running for my life, literally, and nothing happens. And I look over at the guy with the plunger, and he's going like this. You know, and so we go back, and I got to go back in the car again, right? Thinking, okay, so like, hopefully this is going to work, and I'm not going to die doing this, which of course I wouldn't, but it was, and then I get out of the car, action, I run out of the car, I'm running, and then it blows, and it like literally pushed me over. Hanging from 17 floors from a building, you know, originally that was the great Kim Manners was directing that episode. He's no longer with us. And what they were going to do was have Krycek hanging, but they were going to shoot it at such an angle so that you couldn't see my feet, because I'd be standing on a platform, right? They were going to build a platform outside the building at 17 floors. And I said, well, isn't it more interesting if you can see the guy's feet? I mean, isn't it more interesting if you can see the actor's feet, and then you kind of believe that he's hanging? And they said, yeah, no, that's true. And then they worked it up, and they came back and they said, okay, so here's what we're going to do. We're going to put you in a harness. We're going to put you up from 17 floors, and you'll be hanging there with a harness and a cable going up my arm. And I was like, that sounds great. Let's do that. And then I got out there and they were hanging me from 17 floors. And I was like, okay, let's get it. And then let's cut. And let me please God get back on the balcony because it was really high.
Oh my
It was
God.
like 150 feet or something off the street. Right. So, but so exciting, right? Like just so exciting.
Were any other actors like jumping to do this like you? I mean, that they were all excited to do these like insane.
Like if you look at David did a lot of crazy stuff. Mitch, a little bit less so. But I mean, it's just so fun, right? And it's real, true movie magic, and it's just wonderful to be a part of those things. I mean, I've got a list of those experiences that were so memorable, so memorable.
Yeah.
I mean, I tried to, I don't know how much responsibility I can take for that, not a ton, but I do know that I'm an actor that tries to come to set with ideas, so if I see something that I think if it can be improved or changed in some way to make it more exciting, I'll always take that route as long as it's safe,
Nice. Well, we appreciate that. Thank you.
So I'm way older now, so I maybe I'll be doing it less than I did when I was in my 30s or 40s.
I don't know if I believe that. I think you're gonna keep doing it. I think you're still badass. I think you still got it.
Thanks.
So not to make everyone here feel old, but it has been about 27 years since the pilot, and the X-Files continues to be so popular. Why do you think that is? What do you think it is about the show that really resonates with people?
I think that's an octopus with a lot of arms. I think that first of all, the subject material was always fascinating to people. I think there's a lot of people out there that either want to believe or do believe. It's part of our culture now to think that it's very possible that Area 51 happened and Tunguska and all that stuff happened. But also I think you must give credit to the people that created the show, and I don't mean just Chris and Frank and those guys. Although they had a very talented group of people at the time. Bob Goodwin, who was who was the one of the executive producers and ran the show in Vancouver, made all those things possible, so that you could watch an episode that started on a fishing boat in the Pacific Ocean and then cut to a graveyard in DC and then cut to like some ghetto in Hong Kong. That's hard to do. That's really, really hard, really demanding to do of all those people, not just the people that are making the phone calls and setting up, and organizing everything, but all the people that are making stuff in the set deck and the special effects people and all that, right? So Vancouver's a place that a lot of people in the industry aren't in it because their dad was in it or their uncle was in it or they grew up in Hollywood and it just sort of seems a natural people in Vancouver, mostly, at least when we were doing the show, they were in it because they dug it. They were in it because they wanted to make movies. And that's what that show was. It was kind of like a movie kind of every week, and it's interesting. You watch that show morph or change over the years. In the first year or two, it was a little kind of hokey, and it was, they didn't have the budget to sort of support precisely what they wanted to do. And then it got into like season 3 and 4 and 5, and they started to get more money and more recognition and a little bit more time to do things. And then things really blossomed. And then the show moved to LA, and they kind of had money being kind of, I don't want to speak for anybody, but they had kind of all the money they wanted. And really, for me, as a fan of the show, it's that sweet spot of like season 3 to season 6, sort of, where to me, the show really, really took off because they had some money, but it was really based on the ingenuity and the imagination of the people that were making the show. That's I think what made that show so great was the brain power and the make believe that people were willing to do.
It's true. you know, you're saying being on the show, you're also a big fan of the show. Is
Mm.
Tuguska Terma, are they your favorite episodes, or do you have
There
another?
are, um, we got to shoot outside a lot, which I really like, which sounds kind of goofy, but I love getting outside and you're not in the confines of a man-made environment inside a studio, but you're, it's easier to believe, excuse me, when you're outside. And I was being chased by horses and rolling around in the back and fighting in the back of a truck, or as the truck's moving down the road, I got to speak Russian. I was, had my arm cut off. Like all that stuff was so great. So for me, those were kind of my most memorable episodes, and I think they were pretty rich in story too, and again, like there's an area in Vancouver called Stanley Park, which is it's like, I think, the biggest urban park in the world. It's really big, really beautiful. They took one big area and they brought in tons and tons and tons of clean soil, which is kind of weird, but it wasn't just any old dirt. They had to get clean soil that didn't have bacteria in it to, I guess, that was a mandate by the park or something. But they did this wonderful job of creating this gulag, and all these prisoners and all that. It was great. I still believe that those two are great. I also like Dwayne Barry and Ascension a lot. I mean, these are episodes that I was in, so I might be a little biased, but
That's okay.
I thought they were really fun episodes that had a lot of action and a lot of good story and a lot of good performances, like Steve Railsback, right? Just really talented actor. I think everybody probably remembers it all pretty fondly. Some people, went further along the road in terms of production than I did. I kind of got shot in the forehead at one point, and which kind of ended my run on the show to some extent. But for some of those people, that the experience is probably a little bit more fresh. But yeah, again, like it's just like it doesn't serve me to have any ego around it. I went in, I auditioned, I managed to get the job somehow, and then it sort of, in some ways, just not only did it change my life, like I got to do these remarkable things outside of the show, outside of the set. I went to the White House. I went skydiving with the Golden Knights and went to the Pentagon. Did all these crazy things that most people don't get a chance to do. So and not only that, it kind of obviously gave me a bit of a leg up in my career as well. So the whole thing is pretty fondly remembered.
Do you have something you would like to share to the fans? Say to the fans that who have been around, for as long as we all have.
Yeah, I mean, listen, no show. There isn't. I mean, obviously there isn't a show that's ever going to have any kind of popularity without people watching it and tuning in and watching the show. So really the success of the show came from the people who watched it, because if people weren't watching it, it would have been canceled. I've never gone anywhere in the world, and I've traveled quite a bit sort of representing the show, and then also my own time being in Havana in Cuba, and there was a garage, like a mechanic working on a motorcycle, and he looked up and he immediately said in Spanish, "Are you on the X-Files?" And they have like two, at the time, I think they had two, maybe three television stations in Cuba. And it's like, I see myself as sort of kind of pretty average looking, and by which I mean like that I'm not unusual looking. I don't think my face is that particularly memorable, and yet I've got people all over the world at the most unexpected times recognizing me from the show, right? So it's the fans that make the show, inevitably. If it weren't for the fans, there wouldn't be a show. And I've never gone anywhere and been treated anything but with respect by people, you know. And I've gone to a number of conventions and talked to a lot of people, and people are always kind and supportive and gentle. You know, nobody's wacky or nutty, and I find that there's a certain intellect that fans of the show have, that I think speaks to sort of keen interest in things that are going on in the world, or politics, or science, or whatever, you know. It's I have a real admiration for the fans, because the fans of the show, because they're, like I said, inevitably they're the ones who made it what it was and is. I mean, like anything that's well done, let's use books as an example. Any well-written book is going to take you out of your experience and jettison you off to some other place that where you're not even, you forget what time it is, or that you're hungry, or anything, that you have to go to the bathroom, or anything, you know. It like really grabs your imagination and just catapults you into a place where everything's okay. And like when you're in your imagination, you know, it's a very, very powerful place. And that's what this show kind of did, right? Like that's, you know, when you look at it from A to Z, you know, you see that like the story was not only like super wide and far reaching, but also that it kind of had all these little elements and all these little bits and pieces that people could, you know, just sink their teeth into, right? So yeah, it's again, like I say again, just sort of fortunate to be there.
Thanks again.
And thank you guys. Thanks for thinking of me.